Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. The intention of this podcast is to open your mind, get curious about yourself and connect to the power you hold within. I am your host, Karen Maloney, an inside-out coach, helping you to believe in yourself and manifest your desires. Check out the podcast, available on all platforms, and go to my website, www.karenmaloney.com for all info. Welcome to another episode, everybody. How are you all doing? I hope you're well. It's me, Karen Maloney, and today I have another incredible conversation for you and wonderful guest. And this week joining me is Dr. Bernie Siegel, or Bernie as he prefers to be called. And Bernie was born in Brooklyn, New York, and his surgical training took place at Yale New Haven Hospital, West Haven Veterans Hospital, and the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. He retired from practice as an assistant clinical professor of surgery at Yale of general and pediatric surgery in 1989 to speak to patients and their caregivers. In 1978, he originated Exceptional Cancer Patients, a specific form of individual and group therapy utilizing patients' drawings, dreams, images, and feelings. Exceptional Cancer Patients is based on carefrontation, a safe, loving, therapeutic confrontation which facilitates personal lifestyle changes, personal empowerment, and healing of the individual's life. The physical, spiritual, and psychological benefits which followed led to his desire to make everyone aware of his or her healing potential. He realized exceptional behaviour is what we are all capable of. In 1986, his first book, Love, Medicine and Miracles, was published, and this event redirected his life. Many more books followed, including Peace, Love and Healing, How to Live Between Office Visits and Prescriptions for Living. He's currently working on other books with the goal of humanizing medical education and medical care, as well as empowering patients and teaching survival behavior to enhance immune system competency. Bernie wants to help people fix their lives before they are broken and thus not have to become strong at broken places. I loved this conversation with Bernie, and he's such a great storyteller. He has so much experience from his lifespan of working with patients and writing books and learning from patients. And that's exactly what he did in his career. He learns from people and he wanted to help people live and not just cure diseases. And he spoke about how the medical system, they don't know people, they just know diseases. And from his experience, that wasn't enough sometimes to help people to survive. And he wasn't afraid to ask patients who were, air quote, supposed to die, how come you didn't die? And he learned from them and the changes they made that helped them to live and live happily. He also talks about the mind-body connection and how what we think changes our chemistry. He helps people to use their problem as their therapy, and he shares lots of tips from his work and how he used to ask patients to draw pictures of themselves or to describe what they were experiencing in one word. And he talks about in depth as well the power of that and how it helped people to unravel themselves as well. So again, as always, lots in this conversation. So many incredible stories, and if you want to find out more on Bernie's work or his books, you can go to his website, berniesiegelmd.com. That's BernieSiegelMD.com. But as always, I will have links from the show notes on my website, karenmaloney.com, and go to the podcast section. Enjoy! Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining again. And today I have the wonderful Dr. Bernie Siegel joining me, but I think you prefer to be called Bernie. So it's a pleasure, and thanks for joining us today. And I'm excited to talk to you as well today about your work, and maybe you'll share some wisdom and tips and tools with us today. So first of all, even if you just share a little bit on your background and really what made you move more into patient empowerment.
Let me tell you, it all happened because of one patient. I went to a conference that was about helping cancer patients, run by a physician. Turns out I was the only doctor out of 150 people in the audience. It
Wow.
blew my mind. Here in our state, you didn't have to travel far to go there. Everybody who came was a patient with cancer except for me. And it blew my mind that not one doctor in the whole state came to take advantage of it. The other thing I realized later that was a compliment was my patients came and sat around me, because I think most people would move away from their doctor in
Mm.
terms of how they felt about them. But here they came and sat all around. One young lady sitting next to me, I just turned to her. I said, "What brought you? Why are you here?" She said, "You're a nice guy. I feel better when I'm in the office with you, but I can't take you home with me.
Mm.
So I need to know how to live between office visits." That statement led me to change my whole life
Wow.
because I thought, wow, I was in a stage of what I call my cover up where, dealing with being a doctor was painful. All the things that went on you couldn't cure,
Mm.
that you're not trained to care for people. And she reoriented me to that. So my thought was, okay, I'm going to go home, back to the office and orient myself to helping people live, not just curing a disease. The thing that fascinated me most when I got back to the office on Monday, because it was a weekend, workshop, I walked in the door and my partner, who was a very intuitive guy, yelled out loud, "You're gone." I said, "What are you talking about? I'm gone." He said, "You're not the same person you were on Friday. You're going to quit surgery." I
Wow.
thought he was nuts. I said, "I'm the same person. What are you talking about?" Well,
Wow.
within a little over a year, I retired from surgery and began the full time work of supporting cancer patients in group meetings and lectures and a whole host of things.
Wow.
And what was interesting at first was how few people came when I sent out letters to everybody in our office saying, "You want to live a longer, better life? Come to a meeting." I said to the secretary, "Hey, you dumbbell, you didn't say it's only for our patients. They could bring friends and relatives. I don't know what to do with hundreds of people." 12 women showed up. That was my first education. I'm offering you a longer, better life, and you don't show up.
Mm.
Why? Well, what's he going to ask me to do? Maybe I do it wrong. He wants me to read books, draw pictures, answer questions. That's not my thing. And that's something I had to learn. And my wife
Wow.
said, "These are exceptional women," because the only ones who showed up were women.
Go
It's
the
hard to
women.
tell get men to come. And
Wow.
so we called it Exceptional Cancer Patients. That became the name of the group.
Mm.
But they taught me about what I call survivor behavior. When somebody
Mm.
doesn't die when they're supposed to, I don't have a problem saying, "Hey, how come you didn't die?" Then you hear a story. And they're not monumental medical, changes. They're moving to Colorado, getting a dog, buying a
Mm.
house on the ocean, quitting my law practice and playing my violin. Um, just all these simple things where they thought, all right, I'm going to enjoy my life, whatever I have left. I mean, one was a landscaper. He also became a teacher for me. He had cancer of the stomach. I operated on him. And when I said, "You need further treatment," he said, "No, it's springtime. I'm going to go home, make the world beautiful. So when I
Mm.
die, I live a beautiful world." Six
Beautiful.
years later, the nurse in the office handed me his chart. I said, "He's dead. You have the wrong chart." She said, "Bernie, open the door." So I opened the door and there sat John.
Wow.
"Hello." I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, I have a hernia from lifting boulders in my landscape business. But again, I learned to say, how come you didn't die when you were supposed to? He was busy making the world beautiful, and his body got the message, and it kept him living. And
Amazing.
I think it was his 70th wedding anniversary. I was invited, and I got up and gave a speech about him and what he taught me and what he and his wife are like. Just amazing people.
Wow.
They were busy living and enjoying nature and life.
Well,
And
yeah.
that's when you begin to realize that there's a pattern to what all these people were doing. And that's why I started writing books that, share what you've learned. And you see, there's another statement. You get well when you're not supposed to. What are doctors going to call it? A spontaneous
Remission.
remission. That's baloney. In Solzhenitsyn's book, there's a beautiful term, his book Cancer Ward. And he had cancer. See, so he's what I call a native. He knows. The statement is from one of the characters in the book. I found this book in the medical library in the hospital. It says here there are cases of self induced healing, not recovery through treatment, but actual healing. See? And it was as though self induced healing had fluttered out of the open book like a rainbow colored butterfly. And they all held up their cheeks for its healing touch as it flew past. Now, when I read that, it was like, wow, there's another education. Why a rainbow colored butterfly? And Solzhenitsyn has had cancer. So, you know what I mean? He was writing about something he lived with. The rainbow is your life in order. I do a lot of work with drawings, and every color is an emotion. And why a butterfly? Because you have to make a transformation. You're coming out of a cocoon, you're breaking out, and you're putting your wings out. You're not a caterpillar anymore, you're a beautiful butterfly. And I think symbolically, that paragraph said everything that every patient and every doctor needs to know. Because I had learned people didn't die. I'd say, how come you didn't die? You know, and they would always tell me. And a lot of them, I never gave them, a date they're going to die or negative news. And I would say, how come you didn't come back? Well, all the doctors are telling me what's going to happen. So what's the point? And these people became my crazy patients because first I was crazy. Well, I have a magazine near my desk, New York Magazine. Interview with the controversial Dr. Bernie Siegel. That's the headline. The controversial. Yeah. What are we arguing about? Because they never learned it. It was never told them in medical school or anywhere. And I learned from patients. So I shared it. And I tell that to people all the time now. You have an unusual experience or a mystical experience, tell people about it. If they say that's nuts, that's crazy, you can't explain that, fine, don't worry about it. But if something comes up in their life a year or 10 years later, they'll call you and say, boy, I got a story to tell you now. What you had told me, that just happened to me. So at the hospital, my patients became Siegel's crazy patients. But then the doctors noticed they may be crazy, but they're doing very well. Some of them didn't have side effects of treatment at all. And the doctors thought, oh, I mean, the nurse made a mistake. You didn't get your treatment, or the radiation machine is broken, and they'd realize, no, it's one of Siegel's crazy patients. They just don't have any side effects. So they began to appreciate these people and learn from them. I mean, they weren't against doctors, patients doing well. They just had no way of explaining it. So it was hard for them to accept it. At a conference speaking, and there's a poem called Miss G by W.H. Auden. A woman, a lonely lady, goes to visit her doctor. He discovers she has cancer. That night he comes home and he says to his wife, cancer's a funny thing. Childless women get it, and men when they retire. It's as if there had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire. Now, when I read that, I'm nodding my head, yeah, yeah, that the poet has seen life and knows what is going on. So he's just writing about what he has seen. A doctor in the audience jumps up and yells, "Just because it rhymes doesn't make it true." You see, they don't know people, they know a disease. And let me say this, I haven't gotten any medical school to agree with me yet. I love writing to the schools I've had something to do with at Yale and Cornell. And I say, you want to do me a favor? When someone applies for medical school, say, please send with the application a picture of yourself working as a doctor done with crayons. Now, why do I say that? Because one medical school, the entire class of students who asked me to come and lecture, see, the professors didn't, they did. So I got an auditorium full of all the medical students, and I said, draw yourself working as a doctor, and then pass them up to me. Every drawing except two had the student as a doctor sitting behind a desk with a diploma on the wall showing he's a doctor. One had no human being in it, just equipment, including computers. The other had a patient in it in a wheelchair, and he was really being a doctor. He was handing her a tissue. Yeah.
Wow.
But when I saw that, it blew my mind. And that's why I wish the medical schools would say that to the students. You know, you're not going to reject them because of the drawing, but you're going to make them aware that you're coming here to learn about people too, not just how you treat a certain disease.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. So much of what you shared there was so interesting. So many questions were coming through in my head. But, what you said there about the images, asking doctors or training doctors for their images of them being a doctor, and how doctors aren't trained to care for patients, and, they don't know people, they know disease. And that's really so sad in one sense, because that's the way I look at it as well. It is like a disease management system. It's not a health care system.
Right.
So when you left surgery as well and you walked away, what fundamentally changed in your approach in working with patients and cancer patients?
Well, it was what I call survival behavior. I taught people what the patients who did best had done. See, you're changing your body chemistry when you're happy versus when you're depressed. I mean, Monday morning, we have more heart attacks, suicides, illnesses than any other day of the week. Now, you'd say, why Monday? It's how people feel going to work, or school or whatever it is. It's Monday. Um, and so you have to realize, and that's why the stories I told you where people changed their lives, their body got a different message. Yeah, one woman, it was so dramatic for me. I do it myself now after it. She had polio as a child, lost a lot of muscle, and didn't like her body. And she was dying of a neurological disease. And she said, I don't want to die not liking my body. So she said, I'm going to lie down naked in front of a mirror every day and love my body. And she said, I'll start with the toes and I'll go up an inch at a time. She went into complete remission. And I send that out to people now. I say, love your
Hmm.
body, and I can feel a difference myself. I tend to do it, you get in bed at night and I say, oh, I'll give my body some love. And, I have my way of doing it. It's like I
Yeah.
fill my heart with love and we pump it out. And you
Yeah.
can feel a difference in your body when you're sending that love out there. And as I say, it's changing the chemistry of what's going on. And another way people can help themselves. When you have a disease or a symptom, ask yourself, what word would I use to describe it? Woman with headaches, pressure. I had dizzy spells. The world was spinning around, is what I said. Failure, another patient. So I say to them, all right, how does failure fit your life? Well, my body failed. I have cancer. That's not my question. How does it fit your life? Oh, my parents committed suicide when I was a child. I must have been a failure as a child. Pressure. What was in her life? She was going to be admitted to the hospital with severe headaches, migraine headaches. She said, my marriage. Within about 15 minutes, her headache felt better and she went home to work on her marriage. And when I said the world is spinning around, because I got out of bed one morning and boy, I thought, what's going on here? I can't stand up. I'm dizzy. Then I thought, hey, dumbbell, do what you tell your patients to do. Describe it. The world's spinning around. Right. Look at your calendar. You're going around the world, giving lectures, doing things. Slow down. Your body's trying to get you to take it easy. So slow down. And all those symptoms straighten themselves out. So, I mean, I
Amazing.
do it to myself. I'm not just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
telling people what to do. Yeah.
It's the best way to learn, isn't it? We're our own guinea pigs. I often consider myself, and I'm talking to clients as well. I'm like, I'm my own scientist, and my life is my lab, and I'm my own experiment. And I try these things out, and that's what I've discovered as well. The power of our mind, and actually the power and control we have over our body, over our chemistry, over what happens within us and in our life. But it's that thing as well of, especially the medical industry, if they don't understand, it's just labeled as crazy. It's just labeled, like you say,
Right.
that's one of Siegel's crazy patients, or that's really unfortunate in one way. But can you just talk to that a little bit as well? The capacity we have to self-heal, and actually the mind-body
Well,
connection
the
as well.
simplest way, a student called me from Florida at school there. He said, I want to do a study of actors and how they change their body chemistry depending on the role they're playing. My professor thinks it's nuts. He said, what difference does it make? I called his professor. I said, it does make a difference. Let him do it. So he did. Comedy, immune function increased, stress hormone levels down. Tragedy, stress hormone levels up, immune function down. So the professor was impressed. And I was too, because I said, hey, dumbbell, do what you do with your patients. Why are you
Mhm.
having a dizzy spell? How would you describe it? And those were the exact words. Well, the world is spinning around. Oh, you need to take it easy. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And it straightened everything out. And so people can use their problem as their therapy, and it tells them what to do. And also the profoundness of it. This fellow, I'm always telling this story because he was supposed to be dead in a couple of months. And he said, I'm going to Colorado. I want to die in the mountains. It's beautiful. I said to the family, don't forget to call me when he dies. I'll come to the funeral. A year goes by. I get no phone call. I called their number. He answered the phone and he said, when I said, how come you didn't die? He said, it was so beautiful here. I forgot to die. And
Yeah.
those are the people who became my teachers.
Mm.
And
Wow.
I knew if you said to them, how come you didn't die? They'd have a story to tell you. And when they're ready to die, see, that's why the drawings are also very profound. Some are in my first book, Love, Medicine, Miracles, and then a whole bunch in The Art of Healing,
Mhm.
if you want to learn about this. Because the drawings show what's going on unconsciously.
Mm.
So I'll give you an example of a 4-year-old. She drew a picture of herself flying a purple balloon with her name on it. Now, purple's a spiritual color. The balloon's going up, in the
Mhm.
sky. I knew she was saying, I'm ready to die. There were 8 pretty items in the picture. And then there was another child who was lying there crying and looking fine. And it didn't make sense to me. So I said, who's this? That's not me. That's the girl in the next room crying. Because it was confusing me. Why is there a healthy kid here with them? That's not me. I told her mother, take her home. Because the mother was literally running around the world with this 4-year old trying to cure her. I mean, yes, she wants to, but it got to the point where it was ridiculous. And what was she doing to this kid, dragging her everywhere? So I said, take her home and love her. I said, I don't know what the 8, colorful items mean, but take her home and love her. Well, 8 days later, the phone rang. Bernie, yep, today's my birthday. Amber woke up and said, Mom, I'm dying today as a gift to you to free you from all the trouble. And she came and gave me that drawing as a gift. And in other families too. I mean, the wife drew a purple kite going up in the sky. I said to the husband, your wife's ready to go. Let her go. Stop driving her nuts. So he told her, honey, if you need to go, it's okay. Because up to then, he was battling with her to keep fighting. She said, thank you.
Wow.
And she said, I'm going to cut the string. And, she went home from the hospital with him, cut the string. And I think it was 3 or 4 days later, she died.
Wow.
And so again, it's helping people in a way that means a hell of a lot, really more than just treating the disease. So I have to say, my mother, she loved her son, the doctor. And 2 things I got to tell you that were, one is funny because whatever I preached, she lived. And one of the things was Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, said, in a Buddhist country, you hear temple bells all the time, and you stop and you breathe peace. He said, you come to the United States, all you hear is noise. So you have to create your own temple bells. And you get so many crazy phone calls now, all these people trying to sell you things. I started breathing peace when the phone rang. And I realized these people I don't like, they're interrupting me all day long, are now my friends because I pick up the phone. Hello, thank you for calling because I feel better now. Well, I told that to my mother. And one day I'm calling her and nobody answers the phone. And I was getting panicky. And I was about to hang up and call her neighbor to say, run over and check on my mother. She's not answering the phone. When I hear my mother say, hello, I said, Ma, you all right? Why are you asking? You didn't answer the phone. I'm doing what you tell people. I'm breathing peace. I said, Ma, not you. You answer the phone. But
Oh,
I
no.
knew she wouldn't die. She had leukemia and exceeded every expectation. I mean, her doctors loved taking care of her because they were learning from her how to help patients survive. I mean, they loved going to the house to take care of her and her giving them lessons. But when she got tired and ready to die, I said to them, don't think I'm a bad son, that I'm not staying with my mother all the time because I know my mother. And if I'm in the room, she's not going to die. That's letting me down. So I will constantly be stepping out. And please don't think I'm, thinking of myself. I'm thinking of her. And sure enough, I was so glad I told them all that because when I stepped out one afternoon for like half an hour, I came back. They said, you're right. Your mother died.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Wow. That happens a lot, doesn't it? Um, but I love that as well. Create your own temple bells. Like it's so powerful. But again, it's so simple, but it takes us the doing of it, like making some quiet time or some practice a
Right.
priority in our daily lives, especially nowadays when life is so hectic and so busy. And I remember growing up in Ireland, the Angelus would go off at midday and 6 p.m. and everyone would kind of down tools. They'd say prayers. In our family, we didn't, but that was like, that minute of kind of silence, of stillness, of doing nothing. But again, that's lost now as well nowadays. But it's so, so important and
And
so
and
powerful.
none of the people in our family had trouble dying either, because when they were ready, they could say to the family,
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
And when my father said, I need to get out of here, my
Mm.
mother said, help him out of bed. I said, Ma, it's his body he's talking about. He wants to die, leave his body. And so we said to him, when? He said, next Sunday. So we arranged a big party. And I've written about it. And literally, my father died laughing because of stories my mother was telling, including their first date was because he lost the coin toss and had to take her out. And he started laughing, and I thought, he's not going to die. He looks so wonderful and having such a nice day. But when the last visitor came in, and again, how could he know who's coming? But unconsciously, he does. So when the last person that we expected came in, he took his last breath. And he looked so healthy when he died. I thought he was going to say, let's do this again next Sunday because it's fun,
Yeah.
And I thought, what am I going to say to all these people who came? And he changes his mind. But no, he did. Last person, boom, he took his last breath.
That's
And,
beautiful.
there was no sadness
Mm,
or grief in it. Yes, there's separation, but still, it helped every child, and there were children in the room too, and they were nervous about somebody's dying, but they all came to me, the doctor and the family. Is that what dying is like? They were so impressed. It was such a beautiful time and event, and many of them saw his spirit leave. Yeah,
wow.
and these are kids.
Yeah.
They said, I saw him,
Well, they're still
leaving.
more open and can perceive those kind of things a lot easier than us sometimes. And that's
I
beautiful.
had my mother-in-law. I was at religious services one day. I saw a cloud come into the synagogue. When I say a cloud, I mean it's about the size of a pillow that you'd have on your bed. And it floated over my head. And I heard my mother-in-law's voice, "Goodbye, Bernie." And she went out the window. I jumped up and drove down to her nursing home. And the nurse saw me and said, "Oh, you've heard." I said, "I didn't hear." She came and said goodbye. Yeah. Those things, I can't deny them. They really
Mm,
happen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And as I said, and the rest of the family too, when they die, when it's comfortable and convenient, nobody's
Mm-hmm.
fighting with them, and they're surrounded by loved ones and everything
Yeah.
else. Oh,
Again,
let me add this.
yeah.
Well, it might as well be mystical because my wife died about 4.5 years ago in her sleep, which frequently happens in our family. Everybody's tells you they want
Peaceful.
to go, and
Yeah.
I was shocked because when I went in and picked up her hand because she was in bed,
Mm-hmm.
I thought I wake her up. It's morning, and then her hand was so cold. I knew she had died, and it was a shock for me. Boy, did I
Yeah.
feel it! And that's part of what I've learned. Our bodies die, but our spirits, souls,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it, don't. And my wife has been with me for over 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Signs and ways of, letting me know she's around. And a lot of it is numbers. We were married
Mm.
on the 11th, and I found more dimes and pennies in so many bizarre places you can't
Wow.
explain.
Yeah.
And my wife was born on 9/9, and I still get nines. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that impressed the hell out of me, 9 months after she died, I went to the emergency room because my heartbeat was getting crazy. I walk in the emergency room and I hear a man yell, "Put him in room 9." I wasn't even registered. And then he tells me after I'm put in room 9 in the emergency room, "We don't have a room for you upstairs yet." I thought, this is crazy. This is Yale, a major hospital, and there's
Mm-hmm.
no bed. Next day, we got the bed, 819,
Yeah.
and 8 is a new beginning. So I knew I'm going to be fine. And permanently, every time
Mm-hmm.
I go to the hospital, this number, 8 means a new beginning. So the first
Mm.
number is an 8. Then there are two nines, two sixes, and two threes. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And the
It,
other day I noticed because I still have my last wristband lying in the bathroom, from a visit. The second number, which is your case number, I suddenly noticed they all add up to 11. You could take a 7 and a 4,
mm-hmm.
8, 2, 1, and because I was always looking for a 9, and then I said, "Look, they're all
It adds
11s."
up. It's
And my
amazing.
wife gets up in the morning too. I
Wow.
mean, people will think I'm crazy, so I don't tell them that. But I'm lying in bed and I'll get like a message. Come on, look at the clock. It'll be 9:09.
Mm-hmm.
or it could be 954, but if you put them together, you get your nines.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, as I
Yeah.
say, I can't deny that it happens. I'm not
Mm.
playing games.
Yeah,
So
no,
I just accept that she's there taking care
totally.
of me.
Totally, absolutely. I completely and utterly believe in that as well. And, it's this saying as well. They say, like, when you're really tapped in and connected, these kind of synchronicities, like, they're totally normal. They're not weird, they're not otherworldly. They're like, yeah, this is totally proof that I am tapped in and connected and
Right.
open and able to perceive the intangible and the connection that's there. And I think it's A Course in Miracles, but I also heard Dr. Zach Bush talking about it, how again, it's our perception of, we think death is so final and it's so, that separation. And yes, that's true in the physical, but it's death is a continuation and birth is a continuation. And, we are all this energy and this intangible that we get to inhabit in this human life. This is my body suit for this
Right.
experience, but the truth of us is so much bigger than this human form. And we go back to that, but we're always connected to it if we choose to be connected to it, and if we choose to,
Right.
I suppose, do our inner work and connect from our heart to
That's why I
perceive
say to
it.
people, keep sharing your
Mm,
experience,
mm-hmm.
because I had a near death experience when I was three
Wow.
years old. I never thought about it or talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And think back when people began to mention these things, and doctors especially, no, that's your brain activity and it's making you think. But what happened to me was I choked on a toy I had taken apart, because there were men working in the house who put nails in their mouth, carpenters, before they had all the fancy equipment. And so I was imitating them and sitting on my bed fixing a toy, and I aspirated it and was choking to death. And I left my body, and I thought, this is really neat. When you're 3.5 years old and you're floating around thinking, seeing,
Mm-hmm.
uh, all that. I wasn't anxious, you know. I
Not scared
really
or
said,
anything.
yeah, I don't mind being dead. If it's God choosing this, that's fine with me. It's more interesting than being alive. And then I saw the body lifted up and in a position like a Heimlich maneuver, and the pieces flew out.
Mm.
And I learned later that was my angel. His name is George. And he said, you weren't supposed to be dead when you're 3 years old. That's why I did it. Because
Mm.
you know what I yelled when I didn't die? Who did that? Because I didn't know somebody had done it. I mean, I just saw the body move. As a kid, I thought, oh, you had a seizure and everything came out because your body was
Mm-hmm.
going through a seizure. But I learned later, no, it was George, because how my body was lifted and so forth. And I knew how old I was because my mother was pregnant with my sister. So I knew when she came in the room and wasn't anxious to hear what a wonderful experience I had, because she saw the vomit and all the pieces, and oh boy.
Wow.
Nobody, what a wonderful thing happened to me. I almost choked to death. Yeah,
I know, but for
right.
you, your
But
experience
I think all
is
these
different.
things changed who I was
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and allowed patients to talk to me,
Yeah.
because that was something I learned at the hospital and in my office. Patients came in to my office and said, I've learned you're not a normal doctor, so I came with a story to tell you. And some of them
Mm-hmm.
were mystics and had messages from me from my
Mm.
patients who had died. And I would call their families, and they would always verify, yes, that's what he used to say.
Mm.
Um, and the other were patients in the hospital who would page me and say, come to my room. They all think I'm crazy. I mean, in particular, was a lady who had a heart lung transplant. And the person who was the donor was talking to her in her dreams and gave her his name.
Mm.
Hospital wouldn't confirm his name because they're not allowed to give out that
Mm.
information. So
Yeah.
we searched the newspapers and found it and called the family. They said, yes, he
Wow.
was killed in a motorcycle accident. You have his heart and lungs. And she had ridden a motorcycle for the first time in her life. And they said, oh, that's his
Wow.
birthday, day that you went for a ride. And she
It,
wrote a book about it.
wow.
But I would never have heard those things if people would have said, you're a normal doctor,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know. we can talk and not be
Yeah.
judged. Yeah.
Well, that's why it's so important to have quote unquote renegades or whatever you want, like you there, because it is more normal than we realize. But often, like that, people are afraid to speak up. People are afraid to talk about it because they're going to be like, oh, people are going to think I'm a weirdo or I'm crazy. And people fear that. So the more we talk about these things, the more common it is, or the more accepted it is as well. And I definitely think there is a shift. It's happening slowly, but there's definitely been a bit of a shift.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me
But yeah.
mention the cover up because I shaved my head in the 1970s. It was totally out of context because everybody had their hair down to their
Mm.
shoulders then. We have 5 children. I mean, they were like, "Oh my God, look what we have to put up with now."
Oh,
But they realized it really was a benefit because they'd come home and say, "Dad, thanks." I said, "For what?" I did something crazy at school today or at work, and I didn't get punished at all because they said, "Well, you know who his father is." So as
oh,
long as they had a crazy father, they got away with it. But
wow.
by doing that, people again felt comfortable talking to you because you're
Mhm.
different. And
Yeah.
people literally lined up in the hospital to talk to me after I
Mm.
had my head shaved. I
Wow.
mean, I'd come off the elevator to see my patients, and people would line up and say, "Would you mind if I talk to you for a minute?" And I thought, "What the hell are they doing this for?" But I realized later it was because they felt safe
Mm.
talking. And what I learned, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross became my counselor because I needed help. I was a mess with all this going on. And she said, "Bernie, draw a picture for me." So I drew an outdoor scene that I had created in a meditation. And the first question to me was, "What are you covering up?" I said, "What are you asking me that for?" "You used a white crayon on a white piece of paper. It's already white. You added a layer.
Wow.
It's like making snow on a mountain. If you took a white crayon, it's already white."
Mm.
And boy, did she teach me because this you'll smile at. I got to tell you this one. I was an artist as a kid. That's part of why I became a surgeon. I, I didn't know you could earn money selling paintings.
Mm.
So I thought, well, I'll use my hands. I'll be a surgeon. I'll help people. I came home from the hospital, and each day I'd paint a portrait of somebody in our family. And we had dozens. I won't take up all the time. You can read some of my other books about animals and what they teach us. But we had dozens of creatures in the house and around the house. So I would pick one out. I mean, literally, it could be a turtle, it could be a child, it could be anything. And one day I'm coming up the driveway, and every creature was running away from the house. It was like a herd. And so I stopped and I yelled, "What's wrong? What happened? Is the house on fire?" I heard one of the kids yell, "No, we don't want to sit for you. We're tired of sitting." And I realized they didn't want to pose for me because they had to sit still while I painted. So I said, "All right, I'll do myself. It's okay. I'll put a mirror up." And they all turned around and ran back in the house. I painted myself with a cap, mask, and gown on as if I were in the operating room. So if you come in the house, you don't know it's me. It's a painting of this surgeon. Yeah. And boy, that became therapeutic for me because I realized, what did you paint? And I named it because it was in a show, The High Priest. I thought, what the hell are you calling it a high priest for? It's a surgeon. But just something made me put that on the painting. And then I read Jung again, and he said, the reason monks shave their head is to uncover their spirituality. It's symbolic of that uncovering. When I read that, it was like, oh my God, now I understand. I didn't have to shave my head. I needed to bring forth what was within me. But then I also realized why I called it the high priest, because it was related again to the spiritual and things of
Mm.
that sort. So it all came together. And
Amazing.
it's so interesting because when I was painting a portrait of my wife, I started doing it with a fancy evening gown to make her look gorgeous. I mean, she is. Was. But after about 3 or 4 days, I said, "This isn't you. I can't do this painting." And then one day she jumped off her bike, two-wheeler, bike, and I said, "Oh, that's you," because she was always out exercising. And within 3 or 4 days, I had painted her standing over her bicycle, looking beautiful. But what interested me, I had no trouble painting myself hidden, but I had trouble painting my wife, in an evening gown. Really seeing who you're painting, that it's not just this abstract creation, so to speak, but it's the real person if you're
Yeah.
going to paint a portrait.
Yeah. Um, that's powerful as well. And was it through that lady as well that you started asking your patients to draw pictures as well? And is it just draw the first thing that comes to your mind, or do they have to draw
Well,
themselves in a
sometimes
picture?
I would say draw an outdoor scene, because then they'd include, like when I did it for Elizabeth, she said, "Why is 11 important?" I said, "What are you asking me that for?" "Well, you drew 11 trees." And what's interesting is I got married on the 11th, and I'd also said to her, "Oh, I started the support groups 11 months ago." So as soon as she said, "Why 11?" Boom. And that's what shocked me, that she knew so much about me from this crazy scene I created in my meditation. You see, and even when I say to you, my angel, he talked to me. Yes, I have an angel. And I began to realize when I was out lecturing that I was speaking the lecture, but it wasn't what I planned. I wasn't paying attention to my notes. And
Just come
people
through.
came up and said, "There's a man standing in front of you for the entire lecture, so I drew his picture for you." And then one day, again, Olga Worrell, who was a mystic, was at a funeral, Christian funeral that I spoke at, and she came up to me and said, "Bernie, are you Jewish?" I said, "Why are you asking me that? Because I spoke at a Christian funeral?" She said, "No, there's a rabbi standing next to you." And that was George in complete detail, because I met him in my meditations. And I always wondered, he had a funny hat on, because he's dressed, like the 1900s, in terms of the religious garments and so forth. But as soon as she said, "There's a rabbi," I said, "Ah, that's George. Now I know
Mm.
why he dresses, he looks that way." Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. The stories and the way you're sharing them as well kind of reminds me of my own journey as well. I never have the information at the time when I go through things or experience things, but something will always happen or come later that I'm like, oh, that was that, or that. And it's really interesting. And what a fascinating conversation. And even, you've so many books and such a long
It
lifetime
That's
of.
why, if you notice now, I mean, I'm just looking down, medical intuition,
Mm,
books and people I'm interviewing. I won't read all the titles, but they're on consciousness, intuition, uh, and
mhm,
that's something, again, Elizabeth used to say, "Bernie, there are no coincidences." See, Jung's way of saying it was, the future is unconsciously prepared long in advance, and therefore can be guessed by clairvoyance. So if you go to a fortune teller, they're reading your consciousness. But now there are so many people writing on consciousness, intuition, all these things. Like my partner who yelled at me, "You're gone." I don't
yeah,
know what he saw. You know what I mean? I mean,
yeah.
he's not a psychiatrist. He's just a sensitive person. And he yells at me, "You're gone," and tells me I'm not a surgeon anymore. I thought he was nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there are really intuitive people and really tapped in. And, even just one of your book titles as well, and maybe some practical tools or tips to leave people with as well. How can people best support themselves, or what can they do to help themselves between those office visits? Or
I
maybe
think the
help
best,
themselves to try reduce the office visits in the first place.
most important is to quiet your mind.
Mm,
You know, there was a friend I met at a meeting supporting animals, Amelia Kincaid. She wrote a book called Straight from the Horse's Mouth. about how you can communicate with animals in your head, consciousness. I thought she was nuts. This was years ago. But she was able to tell me, to make a long story short, how to find two lost animals while she was in California and Africa. She told me exactly where these two cats were who had disappeared from the house. And
Wow.
I knew you can't deny what she just did,
No.
because I mean, one was funny where she said, "Oh, the cat's in the garage." I said, "Why do you say that?" "Well, it's a mess." I said, "We have 5 kids. That's our basement room where they store all their junk."
Mhm.
And I went right down and found the cat. And she'd been there for days. She was having fun in that room
Wow.
with
Yeah.
all the junk. Um, and, when those things happen, So, yeah, I quiet my mind and I use my consciousness and I can talk to animals. And I think that's why when you reading fortunes, you're doing the same thing in a sense, telling somebody their fortune. And to me, the drawings were easier to work with because I had something. But I could say, draw yourself in the operating room, draw yourself getting treatment from your doctor. Now, one person literally drew the devil giving her poison. I said,
Wow.
don't go. You're going to have every side effect. And
Wow. Yeah.
others draw God is where it's coming from. I said, don't worry, you won't have any
You'll
problems.
be fine. Yeah.
So there's past, present, and future in the drawing. I mean, I didn't devise all this. I learned. There was one book, children's drawings, Life Paints Its Own Span by Susan Bach. I don't know where I found the book, but see, she worked with children. They're not worried about drawing pictures. And then she talked about what happened to them because they all had cancer or other serious illnesses. And she realized you could tell from the drawings what was going to happen. Like I mentioned, the purple, balloon going up in the sky. And so I would say to patients, draw a picture, draw an outdoor scene, draw yourself receiving your chemotherapy, draw yourself at the new job, whatever it was they were going to do. If they said, oh, like one doctor, there's several women I'm thinking of marrying. I said, draw yourself with each one. And I told them which was the best from the picture,
Wow.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So your unconscious knows and can portray those things for you.
Wow, that's really powerful, and especially because again, those deeper subconscious beliefs that we hold, whether conscious or unconscious, they are directing our life. And that image you said of draw the picture of getting your surgery or whatever, and with the devil and pouring poison. I mean, that's just a
Right.
self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's the power our belief holds. And if that's what we
Yeah.
hold within, that's what we're going to experience. So, really, really powerful as well.
Yeah, I do it a lot, through emails even now, because people can email me a
Hmm.
picture and I send it, back to them. And
Hmm.
they're always thanking me for helping them, make decisions and know what's right. And
Wow.
they're often so amazed when I mention some things that I can't
The
interpret, but
information you can
I'll
get,
say this
yeah.
means something, and they'll say, "Wow, yeah, what went on in my life." And let me
Wow.
say, intuition, because I was thinking, my wife and I met in a past life.
Mhm.
I was Irish, met her in Ireland. Um, I won't get into the bloody events,
History. You shared that
but
with me before.
yeah, but when we were working at a camp, taking care of kids, first grade boys, first grade girls, we were standing at the pool, and I said to her, "It's nice that they leave the pool open at night so you can come for a swim here." This is, before all the air conditioning and everything. And my wife said, "Are you asking me for a date?" And I wasn't. I was just saying it's nice to go for a swim. But when she said that, I thought, wow, what have I got to lose? So I said yes, because she's such a pretty girl. And literally, I never would have asked her out because she was so pretty. I didn't think she'd ever accept me as a date. But she said okay, and we end up getting married because of that. And then I was thinking the other day, our oldest son was on a business trip down in Florida, walking around the pool at the hotel. This young woman is sitting there reading one of my books. And he walked past her and said, "Oh, my dad wrote that." And she looked up like, "Yeah, right,
Yeah.
coming on to me." And he said, "No, I mean it. Let me prove it to you. I'll show you." They ended up getting married.
Wow. Love it.
And is it a coincidence that we both ended up in a pool, swimming pool, meeting the woman we married? Yeah.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And just really curious as well, just before we finish, I'm going to be saying that forever. I could keep talking to you. But what do you think as well, or from your experiences and your background, what do you believe or what do you think is the root of disease as well?
Well, it's the message your body is getting. Basically, I don't like my life. So
Mm.
your body says, "I'll do you a favor. We'll end it." That's why I say, like the Monday morning, you have a job you can't stand. How do you get out of work? You have a sick day. See? But if you have a job you love, your body doesn't get sick.
Mm-hmm.
It wants you to go and enjoy yourself,
Yeah.
and take care of yourself. So again, it's the message you're giving your body, which turns into the chemistry, which leads to illness. So there are personalities associated with certain illnesses because of how they affect your body. And I'd say literally the most significant item is growing up with love. Harvard students, this was a study, were asked, "Did your parents love you?" If they said no, by the time they were middle aged, 95% had suffered a major illness. If they said yes, what was it? I think it was 24% had suffered a major illness. And I can tell you right now, too, who gets a gun and goes and shoots people? Yeah, see, if we were all brought up with love, those things wouldn't be happening. I mean, we've had, the school shooting here in Connecticut. And one of the women of a child that was shot, she's so filled with love. It's unbelievable. And what she's doing, let me see, Scarlett Lewis is her name, Lewis. And she wrote a book, Nurturing Healing Love. And she's done more too. And she's incredible. I might as well, let me just read the title so you see. You see, when people make a choice, this is the Sandy Hook killing
Mm.
at the school. How the Choose Love movement transforms lives by Scarlett Lewis. And
Mm.
again, the people who learn they have a life threatening illness and then say, whether it's I'll move to Colorado or I'll close my law office and play my violin, which my parents, wouldn't let me. They wanted a lawyer. I
Mm.
mean, that's where Trump got into trouble. His parents to make money and be somebody. See, they didn't say we want you to make a difference in the world. And I grew up with parents. I'd say everybody should grow up with these three things because I learned it also from the cancer patients who learned the hard way. Ma, I had a horrible day at school and I don't know what I'm going to do. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this.
Mm.
That used to drive me crazy. I mean, I tell my mother I had a horrible day and she's telling me God is redirecting you. I used to talk to God a lot as a kid. I would go
Mhm.
in my bedroom, shut the door so people didn't say to me, "Who are you talking to?" You
Yeah.
know, Ma, I have to make a decision. Do what makes you happy. Ma, well, why don't you help me? Do what makes you happy. And I learned that also was the truth. What the cancer patients were often telling me was, I put a sign in my refrigerator, let your heart make up your mind. They were paying attention to their feelings. Um, what was the third thing? Do what makes you happy. God is redirect. Oh, yeah. My father's father died when he was a child, leaving six kids and a wife. He had tuberculosis and nobody was insuring him. But I heard my father as an adult one day say, one of the best things that ever happened to me was my father dying when I was 12 years old. So when he came home, I said, Dad, what the hell are you talking about? I heard the horrible stories about your survival. He said, yeah, but it taught me what was important about life. And we're all here to help other people. And what a gift that is. Like I mentioned, Scarlett, not hating that man, but loving. And I lent somebody quite a few $1,000s because a friend said, you can trust him. And he's never paid me back. But that's when I thank my father, because I don't get up every day aggravated by this guy or calling the lawyer or whatever. If his life is better, fine. I just let it go.
Yeah, so important. And again, it's that responsibility we owe to ourselves because, if we choose to hold the resentment or the anger, we're affecting ourselves more than nobody else has been affected. And that's what brings, again, like you mentioned before, then we're changing our chemistry within, then we're going to bring about some dis-ease or illness in our life. So it's just not worth it. And that truly is the work as well, choosing love. And it's often not the easy path, because the easy path is often to blame and be angry and stay in that kind of victim mode. But that's what we're all
I
being
was
asked as well.
sorry, but the animals teach us about that. I wrote a story called My Two New Girlfriends. When my wife died. Who are my two new girlfriends? Two cats.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe what they
Mhm.
started doing for the first time. They started, one going to bed with me at night, the other sitting with me all day during
Mhm.
the day. And it was incredible. And it was obvious. I mean, they were intending to do it to keep me company and make me feel better.
Mhm.
And the one day that was the funniest that I had to tell the cat, don't do this anymore. The one who's in bed with me, her name is Hope. I get up and Hope wakes, jumps up and starts cackling and making noises that were just crazy and walking with me to the kitchen. We get to the kitchen and I realized what she was saying. I made breakfast for you because your wife died. There was a dead chipmunk at the kitchen door. And Hope
Mhm.
made breakfast for me and gave me a chipmunk.
Aw.
And I said to her, I don't eat chipmunks, and it hurts me to
Mhm.
see it, dead. So please don't do that
No
anymore.
more.
But she's been good since then.
Oh, that's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, I mean, because she never acted like that except that day. As I said, if I could understand cat language, I would have known she was saying that.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you for such a wonderful conversation. And I will share your website as well. If people want to find out more about your work
Oh,
or
good.
find out more about your books, I will link that on the show notes as well on my website. So that information will be there for people as well. So, just from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for joining and sharing today. And if there's anything that you feel is left unsaid at the moment or you'd like to share as a parting word, please do also.
Yeah, one thing just popped back in my head.
Mm.
My mother, why my life has been such a miracle, was very sick with hypothyroidism, lost an extreme amount of weight, and was told, do not become pregnant because it could kill you.
Mm.
That added stress. But her mother wanted a grandchild. So my mother went ahead and became pregnant. And I keep thinking that, I say Jesus and I are friends. His parental issue is, discussed too by people. But in my case, it was here's a woman who's told don't have a child and she has a child. And, well, I'll just use my mother's words. She said they didn't hand me a child, they handed me a purple melon because her body was so weak she couldn't deliver. After 2 weeks, they finally said, we got to pull him out of there because you're not going to survive a cesarean section. So they pulled me out. And my mother said they handed me a purple melon because there are no pictures. I didn't ask that till I had grown up. I said, Ma, I just saw some. There's no picture of me as a child,
Mm.
as a newborn. And then she told me that story. There are only covered carriages. And she said, yeah, we don't want to upset people. So we put you in a carriage, covered it, and hid you behind the house. And and I said to her, then how did I turn out to be, how did I survive? Because
Mm.
literally, kids who aren't touched and handled
Mhm.
can, talked about immune function, they
Yeah.
can die of infections. They used to in nurseries, hundreds of years ago when kids were put away and left
Yeah.
just lying there. Yeah. But she told me, and I promise this is the last story. because it's so meaningful. I said, how come I survived then? Nobody's touching me. Oh, my mother took you, poured oil all over you, and pushed everything back where it belonged 4 and 5 times a day. And I realized I went from the most unloved kid to the most loved and touched kid on the planet. Now, does this affect your survival? 50 years later, my wife and I go to get a massage. Our therapist friend said, I'm really busy today. You mind if my wife does one of you? Because she's a therapist too. I said, well, my wife loves your strong, coarse hand. So I'll go get you, have your wife do it. She started massaging my shaved head. I went into becoming a child again because it was grandma again. I went into a complete trance. I was in heaven. I opened my eyes. The room was filled with people. I said, what the hell is everybody doing here? I'm getting a massage. Her husband was standing next to the massage table, said, we thought you had a heart attack or a stroke. We couldn't talk to you. We couldn't communicate with you. I said, yeah, I became an infant again. And that again proved to me how our memories are stored within us. And even why parts of your body become sick because of what that part of your body means to you. And why, like that lady who laid down naked and said, I love my body. Yeah, we need to love our bodies and ourselves. And,
Absolutely.
I can't deny all these things because they've happened to me.
Yeah.
People say, I say, yeah, but it happened. I'm not trying to explain it or anything else. I'm just telling you it happened.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all you've shared today. And yeah, it is that truth as well. Our body does keep score, and we often get so disconnected and have no communication with it. And we
Right.
instantly kind of fall into victimhood of why is this happening to me, as opposed to having that open minded conversation of what might this be trying to show me. So I think that's such an empowering message as well for us all, again, to just
Yeah, that's why
love
I love that
ourselves.
one, that one word. How would you describe what you're going through and how much that word
Will
says about your
reveal.
life?
Yeah, so empowering. Thank you so, so much again.
Okay,
And
dear.
as always, I will link your website again on the show
Thanks,
notes.
Karen.
And I wish you all the best.
Back to you also.
Lots of love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And before you go, I would love to ask you a massive favor. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the podcast, I would love for you to leave a short review on Apple Podcasts to help it grow. If you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it.